Hello, friends. Welcome back to the podcast, which is brought to you by no one but us. Today, we are talking about writing. It's one of those things that many of us want to do, but feel like we aren't quite good at it, or we feel like we don't have the time for it. So Akash is a financial writer. Would that be a fair description, Akash, or should I say that you're a financial journalist, like quotes on journalist?
I think I'm still learning because you can't really perfect writing at all. I would say I'm better right now than I was 6 months ago or even a month ago. But
Hmm,
yeah, you're never really there yet.
hmm. So you would qualify as a financial writer, not a journalist, then.
Yeah, I think I'll take that.
Okay. Yeah. Well, either way, you get paid to write, which is amazing. I, on the other hand, don't get paid to write, and also don't write very often. But it is something I want to do. I mean, I really want to do that. I don't know why I haven't been doing it. Maybe we can explore that later. Writing is something that I really want to start. And like the famous words of Yoda from Star Wars: "You either do or you do not. There is no try." So I think I'll take inspiration from that. But I have to ask you, how did you get started? Was it like some kind of a passion that you had from the start, or did you fall in love with some great piece of writing that you read, or is it just because you wanted the money? Be honest, Akash. If it's the money, say it's the money.
Let's just make one thing clear: you don't get a lot of money when you write, and I mean that depends on the type of writing. Financial writing is obviously a more lucrative market,
Hmm.
but it is very, I would say, manipulatable, if that's a word. But yeah, to answer your question, I started writing as most kids do in their English class in school. Remember, we had that essay
Hmm.
section in the English language question paper, and
Hmm.
that was my most cherished part of the paper, because you could let your mind go wild, and most kids did. I mean, they would write about all sorts of things, which was a lot of fun. So that's the first part of writing for every, I would say, child. Yeah, but then later on you got into sort of more specific areas, where in college we had uh, we had these sorts of events where we had to make stuff up. Like,
Hmm.
I mean, you can call it fests, you can call it competition, you can call it whatever you want, and these are across all departments, right? It's not specific to commerce, engineering, arts. You had to be in a competition where you had to just make stuff up,
Hmm.
and that would be in various forms. It would be in either writing a presentation, a model, a physical model, and that's where you actually let your creativity go wild, and that's where it starts. And writing is the easiest form of allowing your imagination to go wild, because the only thing you need is a pen and paper,
Hmm.
right? And you could just start and not stop. So that's how it started for me, in sort of these simple competitions, nothing to sort of fight for or win. There was no medal or trophy or anything. It's just that, can you write something, or can you sort of create something out of nothing?
Hmm. But you never sort of set out to be a financial writer. I'm guessing that you never did that. But how did you end up, writing about financial analysis and all those things?
So I graduated in commerce and finance, sort of tried to understand the whole thing. Still can't understand most of it, but writing was a skill that I thought that I needed to have. Like, if someone graduates from a computer science background, which you did,
Hmm.
the skill is coding, right? Or it's the ability to make with computers.
Hmm.
Uh, I couldn't really understand that, so I thought that I would make with words what I couldn't or still can't with computers.
Hmm.
And the way I see it is, writing, coding, designing, all of these are vertical skills. All of these are horizontal skills, which you need a vertical skill to use towards. So you can write. So for me, my horizontal skill is writing, and my vertical skill is the ability to understand finance a little bit, or enough to write something about it that is understandable by whoever needs to understand it. So the way I see it is, you can take this horizontal skill, which is writing, coding,
Hmm.
designing. These are the three main things right now, and pretty sure a lot of people will find other things to do, and apply it to a concept or a vertical knowledge base like finance, technology, sports, culture, philosophy, history, all of these things,
Hmm.
and you can just start on your own. So to answer your question, I took one horizontal skill, which is writing, which is the only thing I could do at that point. And which is something that most of us have been doing for a long time, but I sort of liked it slightly more, so I took to it. Um, and then I applied it to something that I knew. Now, once that's done, there's a lot of things that will eventually help you in order to become better, right? Which
Hmm.
we will get into further. But that's how I started, and that's how anybody generally starts.
Yeah. So that's a great thing that you brought up, the horizontal and the vertical analogy. So like, if you want to learn something, or if you want to think deeply about something, writing about it is the best way. And that's one of the main reasons that I actually want to write, is that, I can think better. Writing is one of those, like, I feel writing is one of the best ways to understand and improve our thinking ability. Let's explore that bit a bit, a little further. It's no secret that most of the great thinkers have always been writers and readers. uh, when you put down your thinking or arguments in words, as opposed to just keeping it in your head, you are forced to think about all the gaps or lapses in your thinking. um, how true do you think it is in your experience? Have you ever like, when you're writing, has it ever forced you to, think about all the gaps, think about other perspectives, uh, and then, think about your argument in the first place?
Uh, It does, and I think you brought about a very interesting point with the mental lapses. And I don't remember where I've heard this, but when you think, you often give yourself excuses,
Hmm.
like you cut yourself short and you sort of skip from A to D without, you just miss a bunch of letters in the middle, and that happens when you think, and that happens a lot. And if you just keep thinking without implementing it, or without actually being more critical of yourself,
Hmm.
you sort of give yourself a lot of excuses. One way to sort of catch yourself off guard is talk to someone about it. So if you have an idea, or you have a solution to a problem, or if you have anything, you sort of call up your confidant and ask him or her that, hey, listen, these are the things that I have, and they will sort of act like a devil's advocate and basically point holes in that. Another way you can do it on with yourself on your own is if you start writing. And because when you start writing, whatever it is, whether it's a problem that you have, a feeling that you can't sort of get hold of, or just an idea that you think, oh, this thing will be really good,
Hmm.
right? And when you write that down, you can't give yourself those mental breaks or those lapses, right? You
Hmm.
can't do that because it's so evident on a piece of paper or on a screen if you're typing. And if you miss something, you your eyes will eventually go back and read it, and then you will catch yourself.
Hmm.
And then you on your own have to fill in those gaps. You have to bandage it, so to speak. And the way you do that is the way you eventually start to grow in any way. So if you're writing about anything, or if you're thinking deeply about anything, or if you're in a field that is very sort of complex, and you're one of the few people who can understand it, and there are no other people that you can talk to about this, and you really want to get this off the floor,
Hmm.
um, an important sort of self check would be just get a pen and paper out and start writing about it, just to be like, okay, I can lay this design out, or I can lay this idea out, or I can lay this feeling out.
Hmm.
And on your own, you on your own will find flaws, and that is very, very difficult, because when you realize it on your own, you will sort of want to solve it even more.
Exactly. An idea, it doesn't really exist until it is articulated and defined by some sort of medium, like be it
Right.
speaking or writing. I don't remember where exactly I read this quote from the philosopher Wittgenstein. I'm probably butchering his name, but I think it was in one of his books or essays. He says, "The limits of my language are the limits of my world," which is really true.
Mm.
The mind that tries to think without writing or actually putting their thoughts in some sort of a structure, they merely end up ruminating. Writing sort of forces Writing actually forces logic into our thoughts and gives expressions to our intuitions. It definitely gives that structure to our thoughts, and uh, the skill in speaking, writing, and communicating directly represents the skill in our thought. Uh, I think you would have come across this, but Dr. Jordan Peterson,
Mm.
he's a for the people who don't know, he's a clinical psychologist, right? Yeah, he's a clinical
Yes.
psychologist in the University of Toronto in Canada, and he's an amazing personality, great lectures. You should definitely check it out on various topics about the
And it's all
mind.
on YouTube
It's all
for
on
free.
YouTube. That's the best. Yeah, like the complete lectures, not just snippets of it. And you'll find videos of those, like snippets of his lectures, which you might find relevant. So do check it out. But yeah, what I was saying is that in one of his more passionate lectures, he said that if you can write well, speak well, and think well, you are absolutely deadly. You can persuade anyone. The power that you'll wield uh, will be extraordinary. That's so true. The best way to learn critical thinking is to learn writing. And if you can persuade someone with merely words, then that's an immense power that you have, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, if you can understand an idea, it's in your head. It's no good to anyone.
Hmm.
If you can understand an idea on a piece of paper, yes, that's again progress. And again, you will fill in all the problems that you had in your idea in your head. And
Hmm.
if you can communicate that idea both while speaking to someone as we are, or while writing something down for someone else to understand your point of view, that is golden. And that is probably those four steps: understanding it yourself, writing it down for yourself, speaking about it to someone else, and writing it down for someone else. This is like the four-step process of understanding anything.
Hmm. Hmm. And see, this is one thing that I've experienced in my like whenever I try to write. So like I said before, I want to write, but one of the reasons every time I sit down to write on whatever topic it might be, it it like it uh, forces you to put a structure to your thoughts, right? And when
Mm.
I'm writing, every time I see the reason why I don't stick to it regularly, or it's always incomplete, is because I come across these gaps in my thinking, and I don't seem to find a way around it. What I would like to understand from you, how can I, sort of overcome that? Like whenever I find myself, not able to write because of some gaps in my thinking or whatever, or I just, keep uh, going around in circles. How do you overcome it in your writing, be it professionally or personally?
So everybody comes across with gaps. I think that's a common thing, and that shows that you're actually passionate about what you're writing about, what you eventually want to write about, or whatever's in your head. And probably the two ways that you can overcome this are two extreme ways. One is do nothing, and the other is do everything. Right. So do nothing would mean put the pen down, put the laptop down, and just shut it down for a good, say, 10, 15, 20 minutes. Go for a walk or do something else, just to let your mind wander and not let
Hmm.
your mind focus on what you were writing about or what you were typing about or whatever. Um, and what that does is sort of allows your mind, so there's a very nice, I mean, I got this from a course called Learning How to Learn, which is a free course on Coursera. And
Oh.
it's what it does is it tells you that there are two ways. I mean, you have two sorts of activities going on in your head. One is an act, whatever you're doing, whether it's in the intentional thing that you're doing. The other is the diffused way of thinking, where you're not really thinking, but in the back of your brain, something's sort of happening to sort of fix things that you want to think about. So I highly urge everyone who's listening to just check out that course. It's a free course, and it's a wonderful course. Um, and we link to it in the notes. So what that basically tells you is if you're sort of blocked with in a studying habit or in a writing process or in an exercise routine or anything of that sort, right? Uh, just allow your diffused brain to take over, and the way you do that is focus on everything but the task you want to focus on. So that
Hmm.
is do nothing. Let your diffused brain take over. Come back a few minutes, a few hours later, or if it doesn't have a deadline, a few days later, and start writing or studying or reading or whatever your activity is, and just start it again, and you will see that a few of those gaps that you couldn't overcome, you would eventually find solutions to it, or you will find directions to get to the solution. That's happened to me on multiple occasions, and that's something that it will help you. The
Hmm.
other sort of thing that I would advise is do everything. As in, if you don't know what goes after this paragraph or this sentence, or how do I start, or how do I end, or what do I add in the middle, or whatever, just write whatever you think is relevant. Just write, just write whatever you can. Just start typing, start moving your hand. Just do whatever you can and let everything go on the piece of paper. That's probably do everything, right? And then after a while, once you've finished your piece, um, if you go back and read it, you'll be like, huh, there's a lot of information here. I can cut it down without sort of harming the meaning or the true essence of the piece, right? And that's a way for you to eventually go over the hurdle that you have by just getting everything down on the piece of paper and see that, okay, this is all that I wanted to say. Now, what do I actually want to say?
Hmm.
And then start editing.
Hmm.
Because, I mean, as they say, writing is rewriting, right? The most important form of writing is editing and
Hmm.
editing and editing and editing, and keep editing until you've got like a proper finished piece.
Hmm. And you also mentioned a very nice thing, about doing something else when you're sort of when you hit that block. Not exactly writer's block, because I'm not a writer and I don't write often. But you do find yourself, even if you're not a writer, in those blocks, be it blocks in your thinking. You do find yourself, and it's a great advice. Just go out and do something else. Sometimes you find ideas in long showers, or when you're driving or whatever. So that's a good advice, and I think even I felt that sometimes. uh, and let's talk about reading and how it pertains to writing. uh, all great writers are readers, but not all readers are writers. uh, how how has reading, or how has reading affected your writing ability? Has it improved in ways beyond in ways that you did not think it would, or did it improve uh, you know uh, eventually?
It improved eventually, and I think for most people it's um, read and then write. For me, it was write and then read. So I started writing about whatever I had to in terms of both the job, professionally and personally, in whatever I try to write about. But then I stumbled upon a couple of books that were of help, not from a writing guide, but from a, okay, this will help you think in a way that will better your writing.
Hmm.
And I think that's how the two sort of facets help each other. Reading helps writing, writing helps reading. When you read something, you often have these thoughts that, as you said, ruminate in your head when
Hmm.
you're reading the author's words. And then you always have either a contrarian or a complementary opinion to what he or she is saying, right? When you have that, I think it's very, especially if it's a strong opinion. right? It would be great if you can put all of those thoughts, those opinions down in the form of a blog, in the form of a piece, in the form of something that you just write and keep it in your drawer, right? Doesn't have to go out in public if you don't want that. But that's something that often helps you, because you're never ever going to have enough ideas to write a million blogs. As in, you'll never have these ideas in your head all the time. You need inspiration from people, and from other pieces of art or literature or anything that they have written. And one of the ways you can do that is by reading their work and trying to find either differences of opinion or complementary opinion and putting that down. And that will help you think, because what you're eventually doing is testing your own um, thinking to the author's thinking. And even when they are writing something, they're testing their thinking to, can the reader get this or not? Right.
Hmm.
So it's always a battle of the minds when you're reading something. And when you're writing something, it's actually sort of putting the sword onto the battlefield.
Yeah. So what you said was, you basically read to sort of understand, like put your thinking to the test with the author's thinking, or you sometimes read so that you can write something about it, even if it's a summary, or how your thinking sort of varies from the author's. But what I want to ask is, do you sometimes, I mean, how consciously do you look at the reading styles of the books that you're reading? Because uh, the only reason I'm asking this is because you write for a living, whereas me, who's like a casual writer, I mean, I wouldn't say writer, I hardly write, but whenever I'm reading, yeah, I do what I also find myself doing whatever you just said, but I also look at their style of writing sometimes, because now that I'm focused on writing, or, thinking about starting writing, I notice this. But you, as a person who does it for a living, how often do you find yourself looking at their styles or the way they've written?
I think every author, when they write, they have to maintain their voice in the piece, or in the book, or in the essay, or in anything that they write.
Hmm.
And without that, nobody's ever going to read them. And when you, as a reader, read people's pieces, you will very clearly see the distinct nature of how they sort of structure their reading, structure their work. Um, and how you take it in. So, for example, we've discussed this before, right? We've discussed Morgan Housel's Psychology of Money, and how he, in his writing style, keeps his mother in mind, so that whatever he writes can be understood by someone like her, or someone who does not understand finance. So he wants to keep his pieces very, very simplistic and understandable by everyone. So his voice is short sentences, quirky sentences, simple, less jargon, and absolute actionable insights. Um, Another person who, and you see this a lot with academic books. So, for instance, if you read Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, uh, everything is fairly robust and academic, and studies and results and stuff like that. And he does give you a lot of actionable insights, but you would see that it doesn't very easily flow, because the book is not meant to be read as a flow, rather than this is how people think and this is how they implement things. Um, and and there are other books, like if you see old literature books, right, you will see where it's more archaic and more slow, and they allow everything to build up, and they create a setting before they create the characters. Once they create the setting and the characters, they create the dialogue, and then they execute it. So everybody has a way to structure their thinking, but I think the key thing between authors, and you will see this with authors who publish several books because they are successful, is that what they write is often the same, in terms of how they write it, but the exact and the structure is the same, the settings are the same, but the story changes. And
Hmm.
that with respect to keeping your voice authentic throughout the piece is something that most writers I mean, you have to do this in order to continue writing. If not, then you're just I mean, you're not writing for yourself, you're probably writing for someone else, because someone else changes, and the readers often change. But you have to be the same, and if you want to be the same, you have to keep your voice authentic throughout different pieces that you write.
Hmm. So you see, you brought up a great thing again. Like, I think it would be a great leeway for me to ask another question regarding this. Is that you said, like Morgan Housel or Daniel Kahneman, when they write, uh, they keep the audience in mind. They think about the lowest common denominator. Like with Morgan Housel, he thinks about his mother if she understands whatever he's writing. Uh, and even I think when you are writing financially, I'm not sure. I haven't read your work, financial, like your financial writing work, but I think you can answer it. Do you, uh, when authors or writers write to explain to the lowest common denominator, the one who is completely sort of clueless, uh, how does it affect the author? Is my question, or the writer? So definitely it affects the readers are sort of enlightened, and it might be a good entry point for the readers. But in terms of the author, from the perspective of the author or the writer, do you think they will forever be like, for, for lack of better analogy, like the doorman to the very ideas that they want to explore deeply? Do you think they will never be able to venture further into the field than the outskirts?
That that is that is an interesting point, but because you have to balance it out in both ways. You have to keep the audience in mind if you're writing something for someone else, whether it's a part of a publication, or even if it's a blog, you're eventually writing to be read,
Hmm.
to be heard. But you
Yeah.
should also balance this out with something. I mean, you can't really write for everybody without writing for yourself, right? So and the domain analogy is the correct one, and it is a leading one, where you have to lead someone to your idea,
Hmm.
but you have to explain it to them in a way where they will understand, right? So if my idea is about, say, cycling, like it was in our previous podcast, I have to explain it to them in the idea that they would understand, but the idea is mine itself. So that balance is a very tricky thing to sort of find, and it doesn't come easily, but over time and with a lot of editing it does. But one thing that you have to keep in mind, like you already said, was you have to keep your audience in mind. Who am I writing for? What you If you can give them a name, give them characteristics, give them when will they read my piece, how will they read my piece, what is going in their head when they read my piece, what do they want from my piece that will help them, either actionable or just for thought. um, what can I provide? But at the end of the day, it's my piece which I have created on my own. So the balance between giving someone something and also giving yourself something is very difficult to find, but it is essential while writing. Yes.
Yeah, that is interesting, and obviously, I didn't expect an answer, because like a proper answer, because it's a very hard question to answer. Like, you to use the example of your financial writing, you might be writing to sort of enlighten or educate the layman, yeah, and in that, definitely it helps your thinking. You sort of have to uh, precipitate and condense it down to the core of what actually matters, and that sort of helps you as well. But in terms of helping the writer, like for example you, in learning more about the financial institutions, or the absolute core of it, if you keep writing for the lowest common denominator, then I think you wouldn't be able to delve deep into that subject, because uh, I mean, there are certainly exceptions to that. Like, for example, one person that comes to my mind is Richard Feynman, the famous scientist who won the Nobel Prize in physics. He was notoriously famous for his lectures, and especially he would give lectures to undergrads. Undergrads, the people who are just beginning their career in science or physics. Yeah, and I think there was this famous thing where he explained like advanced topics of calculus just from beginning with arithmetic, and in an unchained broken logic, like in an unbroken logic, he went from arithmetic to all the way to these advanced calculus, and every layman could understand it. So certainly some certain people possess that, but he has also depth, like he has studied his subject so deeply that he knows what is the core of it, and he is able to explain. But then not everybody is like that. So I think, yeah, that's a very interesting thing to think about. uh,
Right, that's true, because and there's another point there, right? So if you're the master at your subject, or you know something, or you understand something really deeply, you should be able to explain the most complicated thing in the simplest way possible,
hmm,
right? So you've given that good example about explaining mathematics, calculus through simple arithmetic. It's similarly, if you're in this field, if you're writing about finance, you should be able to explain uh, how can I buy a pen, and how does that tie to economic policies, right?
hmm,
And if you're able to explain the smallest thing while understanding the most complex machine in the field, then I think that's where you have achieved some sort of expertise,
hmm.
and you can communicate that expertise either by speaking, or at a larger scale through writing.
Yeah, but then again, you can. The argument would be, you can never be a master at anything, because if you are, let's say, even if you have mastered something, and you're writing now to explain it to the regular folks, then you truly, like, you're spending that time that you could have spent learning deeply about even further about your subject. But then again, yeah, it's a very slippery slope, if you that whole
Yeah, because that that usually comes from, I mean, I've heard this saying and I hate it. It's those who can't do teach. I mean, I disagree, and I say those who can do better teach. So
oh,
it's,
that's, yeah.
if you can do better, or at least you can understand better, then you are capable of teaching someone, regardless of if you teach them through a lecture on YouTube, or if you teach them through a book that you sell throughout the world.
Hmm, yeah. So we talked about how reading pertains to writing. uh, I want to explore how speaking pertains to writing. Do you think uh, great speakers are writers? I'm thinking of, commentators like Harsha Bogle in cricket, or Peter Drury in football. They've all been they've all been journalists for newspapers before they got into commentary. So they have written about their about cricket or football, and now they're in commentary. And anybody who listens to these commentators would say that, their words are uh, poetry. Like, so many times I just tune into a cricket match, football match, just because, these two, like, these people are commenting on that match, and they transcend the game into something totally divine just with their words. So that's something to think about. But how true is that of across the board? Like, are all great speakers good writers?
I would think so, or I would like to think so, at least. In order to be able to uh, write something clearly, or in order to be able to, let's go the other way, in order to be able to say something clearly, you need to at least have the structure down on a piece of paper. Because if you look at most of these great speakers, especially when it's commentating a match
Hmm,
that is at a fast pace, like football or cricket is, right? You can't really structure, or you can't really make things up as you go,
hmm,
right? Or in order to be able to do that, you need to have a certain amount of structure to what you want to say.
hmm,
And in order to be able to have structure, you need to structure your thoughts. In order to be able to structure your thoughts, you need to have painstakingly done an exercise to structure your thoughts on a piece of paper before you are allowed to go into that commentating booth and sort of go after a live match. So because everything is so sort of in the now, live, live on air, right?
hmm,
You can't really go there full fledged and just sort of take the mic and go all out, right? You won't be able to do that unless you have either experience, and you would see this with any sort of commentary where there are either two kinds of people who are commentating a sport. One is former players within the field who have experience, who've been in their shoes, who have structured their thoughts by actually playing, whether it's kicking the football or hitting the ball on the cricket field, or it's people who have that capability, whether through writing previously, where they have structured their thoughts to a point where, yeah, if I go into the booth right now, and if this happens or that happens, I know exactly what to say, how to say it, and so that the reader would get the most value uh, through my words. Because at the end of the day, my words are just complementary to what's going on the field.
Hmm.
And if that is not structured and not complementary to whatever is happening, then I'm of no use.
Hmm. Yeah, and maybe that's why people like Harsha Bogle or Peter Drury in football, they can make their words sound like poetry, is because they have written it down or read about not just about their particular field like cricket or football. They read about other things. I mean, Peter Drury, like the way he describes the football match, it's like two factions going to war and only one emerged victorious. I mean, I'm not even doing justice to him by speaking, like trying to paraphrase him, but that's how he speaks. And the only way, the only way that he can speak like that is because he would have read about these great wars or these great things that happened in the past, and he's equating that to a football match between these two great rivals, or even two not so great rivals as well. And that's yeah, maybe it's true. Maybe great speakers are writers. They need to put their thoughts down in the first place. But then I'm thinking about Joe Rogan, who's the commentator in UFC. I don't think he ever writes, but he's a good conversationalist, right? Even on his podcast, he brings out the best in his guests, and also when commentating the UFC matches. I mean, mostly people watch those things for his reaction, like, oh, those kind of things. But yeah, maybe that's not true across the board. But all great speakers may not be great writers, uh, but they definitely write something. Like Joe Rogan definitely writes all of his comedy, material first. I remember he was talking about it in one of his podcasts, where before going to any event, he writes down all of his jokes and the delivery of it, with brackets, in brackets, how to deliver it. So yeah, maybe there is some sort of a writing, maybe not great writing, but there is some sort of writing.
Yeah, and I think these three things are very complementary to each other. You need to read to get inspiration, you need to write to structure your thoughts, and you need to speak to deliver.
Hmm.
And if you package this well, and you can apply these three things to anything and deliver the right message, or even educate the right audience.
Yeah, those three things, and Naval Ravikant added two more things to that. If you can read well, if you can speak well, if you can write well, if you can do math well, I mean, do arithmetic well, and if you can code, then you are unstoppable. That's what he said. These five
Unstoppable.
skills: writing, reading, speaking, coding, and mathematics. So yeah, I mean, those are hard things. You find people mastering in two things or three things, but
And these are
you
things that you, apart from coding, obviously, these are things that you learn at a fairly young age, right? At least before you hit the fifth standard, you know fairly how you know how to read, you know how to write,
hmm,
basically how to read, write, speak, and do simple arithmetic.
hmm.
Uh, and on that, if you can layer the skill of coding, and
which is
it would
happening,
be,
which is happening
which is
across.
definitely, like, with a lot of companies that we won't name in India that are doing this.
Yeah,
But yeah, it's happening as young as what, 2, 3, 4 years old.
yeah,
But
yeah. It is happening. Yeah, but yeah. So I think we talked quite a bit about a lot of things. Uh, so what would your advice be for people who want to get started but don't exactly know what to start with? Like, obviously, not where to start with, because, again, going back to the Yoda quote, you do or you do not. There is no try. So if you want to start writing, just start writing, like what I did. Or else, I mean, I'm no one to say, because I just started writing regularly a week ago, like 2 weeks ago. I make sure I write about it. But my question is, or my question to you is, what advice would you give in terms of what to start with? Not how to start it, but what to start with. Like, what do they write about in the beginning? Because everybody is not paid to write about financial things, right? Do you recommend, journaling first, or write about something that you read on that particular day, or watch something? How do you think is the best? Like, what do you think is the best way?
Journaling is, of course, a good way to get yourself into the habit of at least writing physically every day. And it doesn't really, it can be nothing, it can be absolute garbage, but it can just be something that um, you sort of get your mind working towards. So journaling would, how it would work is just get a piece of paper out at the end of every day and just write whatever happened through that day. It's very simple, it's very personal, and it can just be anything that you want, right?
Hmm.
That's a good way to get the ball rolling.
Hmm.
But if you want to, I mean, if you want to specifically start writing about something that is of value to other people, not just yourself, try to write about something that you have knowledge about more than, say, someone would.
Hmm.
Or sorry, and it's a piece of knowledge or a piece of information that someone, if they know about it, would find that of value,
Hmm.
right? And if you have that, then you can sort of structure it as best you want it to be structured. Like, okay, if I was someone who didn't know about this, what would I want to know, and what would I really not give a shit about,
Hmm.
right? It can be what is important, what isn't, what people tell you but isn't important, what people don't tell you but is important with respect to anything. Once you have that, you can sort of structure it.
Hmm.
Once you structure it, you can, or if you can structure it on a piece of paper. And the way I see it is, the easiest way to sort of I try to do this is, you can take a blank sheet of paper, draw two lines straight through the middle like a road, right? And at the start just write start, and at the end just write finish. And just try to understand, okay, if there's a car going from this part of the road to the other, from one end to the other, and if I have to make the audience who's sitting in the car understand this particular topic, what do I want them to see on the left and the right? What does the left represent, what does the right represent, and what do I want them to see,
Hmm.
right? And you can take this through, and it will always be chronological like this. If they don't see part A, they won't understand part B, so I need to explain part A, part B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way to the end.
Hmm.
So this, and you can sort of have this sheet of paper right next to your laptop or your computer, and just sort of draw what what all the scenes that are sort of passing by and that the audience is slowly understanding. This obviously helps in building the structure. Few other things that helps you within the structure is, as we all have covered before, is always keep your audience in mind, always
Hmm.
keep what is going through their heads, and always keep what you want them to know at the end of it.
Hmm.
um, it's also helpful, and I try to do this while writing, and I pick this up from a few people, is if you number your paragraphs, it really helps, because you know that paragraph 1 will should be different than paragraph 2. And if I move paragraph 3, for instance, above paragraph 2, the numbering gets mixed. And that's because the structure is mixed up. A person can't read 1, then 3. They have to read 1, 2, and 3. Right? That always helps in structuring your words.
Hmm.
Another tip that really helps me, a friend of mine told me this, who's also a really good writer, is um, start with a short sentence at the start of your paragraph that summarizes the paragraph really well, right?
Hmm.
And once
Right.
you write that, the rest of it can just be you drawing it out, and sort of touching upon the more important points within that. And the last thing is I think probably the most important is always it's always publish over perfection.
Hmm.
Just get it out there.
Quantity
That's
over
it.
quality.
Exactly.
Yeah. And yeah, those are great things that you said about how what to start with. One thing that I do is something that the great Stoic philosopher Seneca once suggested, and we might be talking about him soon. Yeah, what he suggested was, throughout the day you will be reading something or watching something, on YouTube or movie or whatever. You'll be reading or watching something. You pick one idea from that day, whatever idea, just one idea, you think about it for say for half an hour or an hour, and you write about it. So that's what I'm trying to do. Yeah, like if I watched an interesting video or a movie that day, because every movie is based on an idea. Same with any video, it's based on an idea. So you think about that idea further and you write about it, so that you're forcing yourself to think about it even further. So it's a great way for you to start thinking as well, and also start writing. And another thing that you said, which I don't know if it's a good thing to start off with, like you said, uh, think about the audience, right? But when you're starting, for me personally, I'm not writing it for anyone. I'm just writing it for my like for me to improve my thinking, right? So I'm not thinking about publishing. So that begs the question: should one publish online what they write, or should they just write it in their diary, and should they keep it? What would you suggest, like publishing online, even if it's anonymous or with your name? What do you think is the best way for a beginner?
I think it depends on person to person. And if you're comfortable putting it up, putting whatever you think is of value, or even if it isn't online, if it just is something of a part of you that you want to sort of share with people, um, if you're comfortable doing that, do that. If you aren't comfortable, don't do that. It's up to whoever the audience, sorry, the person is, and what type of audience they want to build or don't want to build. So I don't think there's a hard and fast rule here. Journaling is helpful in allowing you to structure your thoughts and also structure your day or give perspective to your day depending on when you do it. Um, and putting it up online is always a good way to a find your own loopholes, and b allow other people to find loopholes and help you improve, because it's always a process.
Hmm.
And unless you put yourself or put your work out there, it's not, the process isn't going to improve.
Hmm. Well, that's great advice. We will also be starting our blog soon, where we will be like both of us will be writing articles on various things, or something more about the podcast that we couldn't discuss it on the episode, but we might be writing on that. So we'll update you whenever that gets started. We are excited about it. Uh, so I think we can conclude with that. You either do or you do not. Uh, so just start. Yeah, that's the main advice. Just start. Think about quality later on. Put out the quantity every day, 1 hour or whatever time permits. uh, just every day, keep at it, and I'm pretty sure you're going to see your thinking improving. Like, you're going to start thinking about even the small things about your life. Whatever you're watching, you start to think about it even further, even when it comes to a movie or just some video online. You start to think deeply about it, which is a great thing, which is lacking in this modern society. So yeah, get started with writing. Do you have any concluding words, Akash, or have you covered it
i
all?
think I think you've covered it all, and I think the most important takeaway from this is just start.
Yeah,
That's
just
it.
start. Just start. So yeah, that was our episode on writing today. We will be back again next week. If you heard all the birds, birds and weird sounds around you, that's because we're actually recording from a jungle. We're sticking to our name, Ramble in the Jungle. So don't mind the birds around us. Uh, so yeah, we'll see you next week. Until then, keep rambling.